think we're on to Dan Burisch. Here we go. All right. So I'm going to stop telling stories about Kerry, now I'm going to start telling stories about some of the people who we talked to. As I said earlier, I could talk about Dan Burisch for the rest of the day. His story does not lend itself to easy summary at all. And for those of you who don't know anything about him at all, I'm not even going to try and start because I can't do it justice, but he had an extraordinary story that's very complex, that is easy to criticize because it's wild, because it's unprovable, and because it sounds like at least some of it must be invented or worse. And I just wanted to put on record here that I got to know Dan very well personally. This was a privilege, and it's hard to explain how it happened because no one else had access to him at all. And we were introduced to him by the veteran researcher Bill Hamilton. Bill Hamilton had been looking into Dan Burisch's work for a number of years. And when Kerry and I were talking to Bill Hamilton, who was really very accessible, we said, is there any chance at all that you could introduce us to Dan Burisch? Any chance at all? Expecting the answer to be no, sorry, it doesn't happen, can't happen, he doesn't talk to anybody. Bill said, yeah, sure, I'll see what I can do. Next thing we knew, Dan and his, later to become his wife, Marcy, met us in Los Angeles, sat down in a quiet restaurant. First thing he did was he laid down all of his documentation, everything, big pile of stuff, papers, certificates, references, and things that I didn't even know what I was looking at. But he was just open with this big pile of paper. That makes a difference. Some people don't do that. I'll come more to that later. And I think we interviewed him the first time, I can't remember when it was, end of 2006 maybe. And we were in Los Angeles, he was in Las Vegas, it's only a few hours away. And we come to Vegas fairly regularly. Every time we went to Las Vegas, we would have dinner with him, or we'd have coffee with him, or we'd just meet him very briefly for something or other. And we would hang out with Dan at every possible opportunity. A lot of it was off record, some of it was on record, but a lot of it was off record. He was heartfelt, heart-centered, intelligent, funny, smart, and kind. I don't believe that he ever knowingly told a lie to me personally. I don't believe he did that. That's all I can say. I loved every minute I spent with him. He felt like a brother. He was a warm man, and I wish that everyone that we spoke to was like him. That's all I can say. And then a very remarkable thing happened soon after that. And this is one thing that I want to put on record. This is something that is already on record, but it's little known. And in the middle of 2007, summer 2007, we were in regular email contact with Dan at that point. And he told us, and he told other people in his email contacts, he said, I'm going to take a sabbatical for 6 months because I've been inducted into a classified project and I'm not going to be able to answer my emails. I'm going to be out of touch. Okay? I'm off for 6 months and I'll be back. It's a sabbatical. And we said, okay, sure. And sure enough, he wasn't available. We'd send him emails every now and then, just because we were copying him on something, and we'd always get this little auto reply saying, I'm on sabbatical, I expect to be back in touch in December. And we didn't know what it was about. Marcy didn't tell us. Marcy wouldn't tell us. She said, look, it's classified. And okay, so it's classified. We moved on. In December, he gets in touch with us and says, hey, my project is over. let's have dinner. And we said, sure. We drove to Las Vegas. And he met us in a really noisy casino restaurant. It's probably the noisiest casino restaurant I've ever been in. It's like downstairs, amplified a dozen times. It was really, really cacophonous. And he talked to us for 6 hours. Sorry, for 5 hours. Is there a problem with the feed here?
It's good.
Okay, thank you.
But it came up about 10 minutes ago, so we may have lost 10 minutes.
We didn't, it didn't affect the recording.
It was just on screen.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted
No,
to share.
it still operates
Okay.
even if it goes in and out.
This is a bit like that story of Ralph Ring in the audio, isn't it? It's like, I might have to do this all again sometime. I have to wait a few days before I do that. Okay, so Dan talked to us for 5 hours, non-stop, in this noisy casino restaurant. It wasn't 4.5 hours, it wasn't 4 3/4 hours, it was 5 hours. That's a long time for someone to talk. He talked to us about what he'd been doing. We were the first people who he wanted to talk to. There was a friend with us who came along. It was Kerry and myself and a friend we'd never even met before. Dan just completely overlooked the fact that there was this stranger there who was a friend of ours, and this friend of ours was his jaw was on the floor listening to this stuff. What Dan told us was that the classified project which he'd been involved in was using this time portal looking sort of it's like a time portal telescope thing. They called it looking glass. It's like you look into it and you see the future. Like Nostradamus didn't have a crystal ball, like the crystal ball of a seer. And the project, which is a classified intelligence project, was to identify what the most probable future timeline was and what was there. That was what this, and it took 6 months to get down to this. And he said that what was most probable, that what had been formally and scientifically identified as the most probable timeline, was what they had called, next, Timeline 1 version 83. Okay? You can look this up on Project Camelot. Look up Project Camelot T1V83, and in that long page, that web page which I wrote out, was my best recall, because that was all off record, nothing was recorded, I wasn't making notes. I was pretty open-mouthed by what Dan was telling us as well. As soon as our meeting was over, I went and wrote down everything I could possibly remember. And this was in December 2007. What Timeline 1 version 83 held in store, which they said was what was coming as best as they knew, was that in 2008 Hillary Clinton would be elected president. Now we know that didn't happen. Dan said that they thought that was what was going to happen. Okay? And shortly after Hillary Clinton was elected president in 2007, there was going to be a global financial crash of catastrophic proportions, followed by a nuclear war, followed by God knows what then was going to break out all over the planet. And what Dan was telling us for 5 hours was the fine detail, written like a history book, looking back, of that entire period and the years to come, which was something that we were kind of thinking, shit, you know, we do not want to see this. And we know that that didn't happen. I've never forgotten it because it was so vivid, it was so dramatic, it was so authentic. In my mind, there's no way that anyone could have invented that, could have scripted that. The authenticity and the passion and the nervous energy with which Dan was downloading this for all this time sure felt real to me. And it was an example of what I said earlier, that as best I know, everything that he said, he believed it. And he was doing something for 6 months. I don't know whether he was on vacation somewhere or whether he was working in Area 51, but he was doing something that no one else knew about. And of course, I mean, the last thing I'll say about this is then this begs the question of why the heck everyone in the behind the scenes New World Order world seemed to be wanting Hillary Clinton to be president again when it didn't work out in 2008. They sure wanted her to be president in 2016, and that didn't work out either. And my personal best guess is that whatever they are engineering to plan, it's not working out. It's not working out. And one thing that Dan did say to us, just as a kind of one-line flip summary of this kind of thing, is that what tends to happen with this timeline, with this looking glass portal viewing device, is that the key players, like the politicians, the people who tend to be prominent in the world's news, let's say, that they look ahead and then they see what's coming and then they know what they're meant to do. You see, they follow the script. They follow the script that they see in front of them. It's like, oh, I see myself doing this in a few months' time, so I guess that's what I better do. And so there's a kind of self-referential looping, making it come true kind of thing that these guys will sometimes do. It's very easy to make decisions if you know if you can see the future and it seems to be the right thing to do, then you just do, then you don't have to worry anymore. You say, well, I guess I do that, and that's what happens. There were several times when Dan intimated that that's the way a lot of senior prominent figures operate. How that works out metaphysically, I have absolutely no idea, but what is really clear is that the script, and I say that in inverted commas, it's changed. It didn't work out the way that they were expecting to. It didn't work out the way that they had seen. Something had influenced it to be different. And my personal feeling is that there are significant other influences happening which are somehow pushing or pulling or steering or nudging things to be better than they could have been. That's all I can say about that. Okay. That's all I can say about Dan. Otherwise I really will talk all day. Next.